Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for tuning in. Great questions on the comments, a lot of support. I really appreciate it. Today's video, I'd like to tell you a few things about the RSV4 in terms of ownership. At this point, I will have the bike close to 2 years in November of 2020. I bought it at the November 2018. I have around 7,000 miles on the bike, and I wanted to discuss a few things about owning this bike, maintaining it, and give you a couple ideas if you're considering purchasing an RSV4. The RSV4 is really a race bike with lights, and why I say that is because it has almost no comfort or not much rideability at lower speeds. And why I say that is, first of all, when you buy the bike, it's geared very high. It's really designed to be ridden on the track. The suspension is very stiff. The chassis is extremely stiff at lower speeds. Once you get moving, there is flex in the chassis, there's flex in the suspension, and it just doesn't like to be ridden slowly. So if you're an avid track rider, this might be a great bike for you. If you are a commuter and you want to commute on a super bike, there's probably a lot of better options out there. But if you have to have an RSV4, I want to point out a few details about the bike so you have an understanding on maintenance, parts availability, and overall ownership. First things first about the RSV4 is that the gas tank is not aluminum. The gas tank is not any type of metal. It's a polymer, and Aprilia has had problems with the gas tank actually expanding. I don't know why. Maybe because they didn't put in a good system to release fuel vapor. But that being said, the gas tank does expand, and that's can be an issue. So as an owner of the Aprilia, what I typically do is once every 2 days, I will open up the gas filler cap just to allow some of that air to come out, so this way I don't have any issues with the tank expanding. Over the years of ownership, I haven't seen the tank expand, but I definitely do that occasionally, every 2 days roughly, to make sure that air vapor from the gas comes out, and I don't have any tank issues. Other than consumables like brake pads, tires, chain, sprocket, all that stuff, the aftermarket is plentiful to buy anything you need to maintain your Aprilia. The oil is readily available. Aprilia recommends a Castrol 5W40 T4. You can buy that on Amazon. The oil filter, there's a lot of aftermarket options. I like to use the factory OEM oil filter. It's a little pricey, but I guess the same price as what you would buy for a Japanese bike at the dealership as far as oil filters are concerned. It takes a little bit of oil, more oil than Japanese counterparts, 4.1 quarts versus 3.5 for like a GSXR or a Honda. The brake pads, the OEM brake pads, are very expensive, $250. Though you can go in the aftermarket and get a different pad for a lot cheaper. The OEM brake pads are great. A lot of bite. Actually, too much bite for the street possibly, but they work really well. They last a good long time. I got about 6,500 miles on my OEM pads before I needed to replace them. Other than that, if you want to buy this bike, you have to realize if you do run into an issue, you're going to have a hard time finding a mechanic that really knows this bike. They're rare. I'm assuming what part of the world you live in, you might find some really great people to help you out. Like if, for say, you're in the UK, you have a lot of good options. Here in America, and especially here in Florida, I don't have very many options. Fortunately, I'm very mechanically inclined and not afraid to rip this motor apart if I have to. So that's a risk I can take, and see if I can get everything sorted out myself. So far, I've had zero issues with this bike. 7,000 miles, 6,990 miles or so. So 7,000 miles, no issues with this bike. Not a check engine light, nothing. The bike is modified. I have a flash done from Open Flash Tablet out of California, and that's just a mail order flash made 200 to the wheel. I have the gearing adjusted, one down in the front, one up in the back sprocket, just to get me some lower gearing, a little more rideability around town. I really don't need the bike to hit over 200 miles an hour. I'm not going to do that. The other thing too is that Aprilia and Ducati as well requires some specialty tools for basic maintenance. Nothing crazy, nothing that's not available. You can find it online. It's not very expensive. But for example, the front axle, there's an alignment tool that you should purchase to do to remove the front wheel. That's the other thing, is if you own this bike or a Torno or any one of those Aprilias or Ducatis, you can't just go to every mechanic because they're not going to have that tool possibly. You can do it without the tool, but it can give you problems later if you don't use that tool. It's inexpensive, 20 bucks or so on eBay. But if the mechanic doesn't have it and they try to do it another way, you could have issues with your forks, just removing the front wheel to do a tire. That being said, I don't burn any oil, not a drop. I do my oil changes every 2,000 miles. I know it's excessive. I do it for two reasons. One thing is that I'd like to remove the older oil to make sure that there's no debris in it, metal shavings or whatnot. As well as I like to change my oil often because on motorcycles like this with the wet clutch, you have clutch material in there, you have transmission material in the oil, and you have obviously wear from the engine in the oil. So I like to do it every 2,000 miles. Also gives me an opportunity to take off all the fairings, on the sides at least, and clean everything underneath there, because as you ride you pick up debris and dirt and all that good stuff. So regardless, RSV4, great bike, probably a better bike to have as a second bike. As your only bike and you really want to ride and you want to put a lot of mileage up, make sure you have the right infrastructure to go to find parts. Make sure there's a good mechanic and a good dealer support near you. If you don't have that and you're not mechanically inclined, you're probably better off with a different bike, just so this way you can actually enjoy it and you're not pulling your hair out. Fortunately for me, an engineering background and a love for mechanics, it's a little easier for me to deal with this bike than other owners. So this is initial thoughts about ownership of the RSV4. Obviously, cost of entry is expensive. My insurance, even though it's a 1,000, is more than my Suzuki 1,000, with multiple car and vehicle discounts. Not much more, but it is more. Fuel economy, who cares, right? But it's worse than most 1,000s. It just is what it is. The bike does not like to be under 5,500 RPM. It just doesn't like it. It kind of herky-jerky. Low speed riding sucks. Absolutely sucks. You have to use a lot of clutch and first gear to get the thing going. The other thing too, the power is at the higher RPM, so once you lay on the throttle, you can be in second gear or third gear even, and right around 9,000 RPM, all of a sudden it starts to snap up a wheelie, and it comes up real quick. It's not very progressive, so you think you got throttle control, and all of a sudden it snaps a wheelie on you. Still a fun bike. If you want an RSV4, get what you want. I always wanted one. I'm happy I have it. I'm happy I have the experience, but this is truly a race bike for the street. The Japanese bikes have a lot more plushness to them. They're more comfortable. They're a lot more reliable, and the parts availability are there and the cost to get into one. Thanks for checking out my channel again. If you have any suggestions for videos, please tell me. I'd love to hear from you. Please comment below if you have any questions about the Aprilia. Please ask. Thanks. Take care.